The pretend Republican congressional representative from Kentucky, Representative Thomas Massie, is trying to get his face in the news again, particularly the liberal media, and says he is taking the first steps to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. Now, we just had 4 radical political activist judges trying to take over the powers of the presidency in just the last few days. Trump is trying to curb rising crime in the Democrat-run cities, and the only thing that Massie can think of is the Epstein files. Welcome back to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality has a seat at the table. Podcasts like this one are so important for disseminating information which you cannot get out of legacy media. Social media is driving a lot of the issues today, and we cannot cede that ground to the same elements that took over what was called the mainstream media. Today, this type of media is taking over, and that's a good thing because we lost control decades ago with the traditional media, sometimes called the legacy media. And conservative thought, Republican thought, common sense thought was locked out of the discussion. Now, I have an interesting and maybe some surprising questions that I'm going to be asking at the end of the podcast, and I truly want to know the answer to them. So stay tuned till the end. They are not just rhetorical, but I think you too will want some answers. So with that, let's get into some of the important news that you need to know and what you need to do about it. To start with, here's another marker that identifies the threat the Democrat left is to your life, liberty, and happiness. Upon the tragic shooting deaths of 2 young children while praying in the pews in Minnesota, Senators Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer wasted no time calling for gun control, not mental health assessments. The gun didn't shoot itself. It had legs, but the legs of someone mentally ill and of the same political philosophy as Klobuchar and Schumer, that clan who always look for an opportunity to call for a confiscation of your guns and a gun ban. They don't want to deal with the mental health issue, they just want to take your guns. And guess what? The shooter here in this instance, again, was transgender. It's a mental issue, folks. I rest my case on his mental illness and the illness called gender dysphoria, which was barely known or talked about 10 years ago. Folks, I have yet to hear either one of those 2 radical Democrat senators tell the truth about anything. They are such liars that one could almost think they are holograms of demonic actors themselves. Neither Schumer nor Klobuchar gave any condolences to the loss of the children or the grief of the families. There is not a word in the dictionary strong enough to describe the depraved beings that both of these Democrat senators and their colleagues are. They oppose everything that is good in life and gaslight the world with all of their lies in furtherance of their fever dream of authoritarian takeover in this country so as to cement themselves in power forever. Shame on the people of Minnesota for electing the likes of the radical Klobuchar and those in New York who voted for Schumer. There are more than just those 2 who have a destiny with hell, but they were the first to try to take political advantage of this tragedy in Minnesota. My heart is saddened when I think of the loss of the life of those 2 beautiful children and for the grief of the parents. Personally, I don't know if I could physically survive the loss of a child. Well, this is of no consolation, but the shooter is in hell as he murdered and harmed an innocent. The children were in prayer, and they are in paradise. The reason salvation is so important is because hell is so horrendous, and justly so for those like the shooter. Remember, without hell, there would be no ultimate justice. And I thank God that the death of these children will be avenged, and I thank God that there will be an equally just judgment for Klobuchar and Schumer for the malevolence they have inflicted on the country over the years that they have been in office. Now, I want to talk about what deep trouble we are in. Yes, Trump has given us a reprieve, a short one. But if anything should impress upon you the trouble you are in, we are in, it should be how corrupt and dangerous the left is. Folks, the Democrat left is a danger to your life, liberty, and happiness. Just look at how consumed they are in their hatred for Trump. That is who these people are. They fake virtue. For example, we are losing our freedom of speech here and around the Western civilization. If I could only resurrect our founding fathers, I think their judgment would have every Democrat leftist on death row. There has been a radical departure and erosion of freedom of speech in the West. 10 times as many people have been arrested in England than in Russia for their online comments. Recently, comedian Graham Linehan, on a trip from Ireland to England, was arrested at customs for tweets that he had made regarding transgenderism. The stupidity of Western culture is astounding, considering the rapidity with which our freedoms are collapsing. It is almost as if God has passed judgment on a people who have been given much, but given their hedonistic conduct, deserve so little. The very thing that has preserved the West and all of its accomplishments is being destroyed, and that is simply because we are not responding correctly to those who are destroying the very foundations of Western civilization. It is so common sense that those who cannot tolerate free speech are the liars and suppressors of truth. And in a way, one could make a compelling argument that to lose free speech supports the proposition that you didn't deserve it in the first place. So here you have Mr. Linehan being arrested by people in a government who are protecting a lie because the lie can't survive the truth. We are heading for, if not already there, into a very dangerous and dark time, and we have only ourselves to blame. This toxic poison that has infected the body politic and society is likened to a chemical reaction that has reached a critical mass. It is so far advanced that unless the good guys and the freedom lovers take drastic measures with a tenacity and persistence to stamp out those ancient destroyers of society, the West will not survive. Here's just another example of how extreme it is. The media sources across countries in Europe, and particularly Germany, are suppressing the truth about what the Muslim leaders in communities are saying. And of late, those communities are telling the rest of the Germans that the Muslims have every intent on taking over Germany, instituting Sharia law, and that the Germans who don't like it, they'll just get killed. Now, what's so difficult to believe about that? And why would you not take people seriously when they tell you that they want to kill you? The immigrants who flooded Europe, thanks to Angela Merkel, who belongs in jail for the rest of her life, refuse to assimilate. They want nothing of their culture, the German culture, or ours for that matter. They hate their hosts. In America, they are building their own little enclaves in cities and towns around the country. The last 1,300 years has proven what the Muslims and the Islamists have done to other countries and the world. So the time to be alarmed was years ago. Thus the reason why extreme measures must be taken now, which I doubt many in the West have the intestinal fortitude to do. Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II of Spain were the last ones to take the necessary measures which saved Europe from Islam. I don't see anybody today capable of doing that, particularly not within the democracies. And that is why democracies fail and fall victim to tyrants. This is leading to a new civil war, so you've got to wake up. The Democrat left have been talking about it ever since Obama. As God said, my people will perish for a lack of knowledge, and indeed we are. The kind of ignorance that is killing us is unforgivable. Instead of the first shot being fired at Fort Sumter at the start of America's Civil War, the first shots of the new Civil War in America has been fired by the federal judges, appointed by the radical left and the Democrats. As I have written about elsewhere, the greatest threat to America today is the judiciary, and in particular those judges who were appointed by communists and authoritarians who called themselves Democrat socialists, like Obama and Biden. Recently, a federal judge ruled that Trump's deployment of troops to Los Angeles was illegal. Given the circumstances on the ground, that is the lawless takeover by criminals that are in our Democrat-run cities, it is clear and has been commented upon before that chaos is a tool of the left. This is nothing new. They began laying the groundwork for this by declaring cities and states as sanctuaries. Now, folks, please wake up and you need to get this. This is called nullification of the Constitution and is exactly what the Confederacy did leading up to the Civil War. Mark Levin has remarked on this before, and he's remarked on it many times regarding and connecting the dots, showing the similarities between now and the Civil War, where federalism was under attack and the Confederacy nullified the federal powers. This led to states seceding from the Union. The same is being done today, primarily in our cities and in our blue liberal leftist states, where the mayors and the governors are refusing to cooperate with our immigration control enforcement officers, which in itself is a felony. I long to see Attorney General Bondi arrest and charge city officials and governors and placing them on trial. Most people have no clue as to how far this departure from federalism has gone. The danger we are in is not that the situation is not curable. It is because there are few that have the political courage outside of Trump to take the drastic measures necessary to preserve our union. Now, our freedom of speech has been misinterpreted. Freedom of speech is not, nor does it give anyone the freedom to lie. Under our very noses, and particularly common sense and freedom-loving people, they stood by and watched our media politically and socially devolve into a mindless propaganda hives that are fueling a societal breakdown and moral decay. As our forefather John Adams so aptly stated when asked what kind of government they had given us, he responded, "One that is fitting only for a moral people." So therein lies one of the roots of our impending demise, because we simply tolerate and legitimize and give legal protection to the lies that the left spreads. Approximately a century ago, our government passed a truth in advertising law so as to protect people from deceptive advertising. Frankly, we would not even need to go that far. All we would need is for the Federal Trade Commission to exercise its authority in reporting companies that are engaged in propaganda and patently false narratives and pull their licenses. This has been threatened before, but nobody has really pulled the trigger on it. This again brings us back to whether the people and their elected officials have the political will to stand up for what is right. Now, we have talked about the crime situation in our largest cities, and nothing ever seems to change, does it? Big city Democrats benefit by high crime rates. Over the Labor Day weekend, to no one's surprise, there were 58 people shot, killed, and or maimed in Chicago. Yet Governor Pritzker says everything is under control. Well, that's the same stuff we heard from the mayor of Chicago. How could you tolerate them saying this? When was the last time you heard Governor Pritzker of Illinois or the mayor of Chicago, Johnson, speak and not be fact-checked as liars? Why would people ever tolerate this? The Democrat left message is clearly to accept the crime rate as a new normal and to just tolerate it. That's what they're really telling you. And while I find these individuals repulsive, deserving life sentences for their corruption, part of me, as an attorney, would almost exonerate them on the basis that the people deserved it because they voted for it, not just once, but repeatedly in our largest cities over the last 50 years. Another part of me wishes we could just wall off the cities, as in some future sci-fi movie that we've seen, where the only means of containment was to turn the entire city itself into a prison. It all comes down to the political willpower of voters and their elected officials. In truth, the National Guard is needed to increase police force and encourage recruitment. The false narrative being floated by corrupt federal judges is that Trump is trying to create a national police force. Now, folks, that very phrase right there, that the judge inserted as his opinion, shows a bias that's so profound And that's so out of place in a judicial opinion that it should be stricken. He should be overturned. And he ought to be disciplined for that. He knows better. But he's a political activist. That kind of speculation in a ruling is reversible and should be condemned. Remember, the left created the crisis, and as in times of war, and particularly in civil war, extraordinary measures are needed. And that time is now. And for those in the rural communities, don't think yourselves safe because there is no containment, and particularly in those cities. And you too will at some point be victimized. Now, we have talked about so many problems America faces, and it's not that they are insurmountable, because they are not. They're easily solvable. For example, the invasion on our southern border was fixed by President Trump within 60 days of taking office. The Democrats lied to you for 4 years, letting millions of unvetted aliens into the country, and claimed that it was a complicated problem, and they could not fix it without congressional action. We now know that that was a lie. Why would you ever tolerate the Democrats again that said that? We have also talked about the crime problem in the major cities, and it is indisputable that it is not only a problem, but as with all other problems, there is a core ingredient, and that ingredient is the Democrat Party. The 50 largest cities in this country have been run exclusively by Democrats for nearly 50 years. Given that, you would think that the people would wise up and change the way they've been voting, but they don't. But there is another problem with regard to the vote, and that is the Democrats, who are always caught cheating, and they refuse to allow legislation that would secure the integrity of the elections. That's because in many instances, they can't win without cheating. So when the president proposes an executive order for voter ID across the nation, the Democrats oppose it. No big surprise there. There's hardly anything you can do today without producing your identification, whether it's getting a driver's license or picking up prescription drugs or flying on an airplane, etc., etc. It is so abundantly clear that the problems in this country are political, and as Dr. David Hansen has stated, and I as well in many, many articles, have warned chaos benefits the radical left, now known as the Democrat Party, that they took over. So what do you do about solving a political problem? Well, it means you have to get active and you have to get involved. You just can't sit on the sidelines and wait for somebody else to do it. The simple-minded people are always going to gravitate historically to the corrupt because they are so gullible. They want an easy fix to their life, and they want to be cared for, and they feel entitled. Also because they have the vote, and their main recreational activity is procreation, such that they're going to outpopulate those who do have solutions to the problem. But let's not forget that you have those who find the simpletons of life useful idiots that will support their corrupt agendas, like authoritarianism, communism, and socialism. Of course, the simple-minded want something for nothing. President Trump has shown us the way and given us common sense solutions to our problems that can work very quickly and effectively. But it's going to take the involvement of right-thinking and common sense people getting involved in the process. So whatever state you're in, you must insist with your legislators that we have to secure elections. And as most countries in the world have done by outlawing mail-in ballots due to the known and historic fraud associated with it, we must do the same here. Otherwise, the cheaters will win, and they will corrupt the process to maintain power and privilege. Now, while we have a brief reprieve with President Trump, we are in great danger in this country from the left. Europe has already lost, and the likes of former leader of Germany, Angela Merkel, flooded Europe and the European Union with immigrants that practice a faith whose primary goal is to kill them. The enemy of Western civilization is already within our gates, and good people doing nothing is the primary cause. Do not think that we have won the day and are safe with Trump in office. The enemies of freedom are well entrenched, and the things they are doing to undermine this country are now engaged, and it's frightening. How much more proof do you need when they now protest and openly call for the destruction of the country? Maybe we don't deserve what God has given us. Well, here are the questions that you all have been waiting for. The pretend Republican congressional representative from Kentucky, Representative Thomas Massie, is trying to get his face in the news again, particularly the liberal media, and says he is taking the first steps to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. Now, we just had 4 radical political activist judges trying to take over the powers of the presidency in just the last few days. Trump is trying to curb rising crime in the Democrat-run cities, fix the economy that Biden destroyed, and is battling China and Russia. And the only thing that Massie can think of is the Epstein files. Well, I guess this do-nothing and obstructive fame seeker of a nobody representative who, by the way, only found fame because the margins in the House are so thin and he sucked up to the liberal media, he deserves some scrutiny himself. Now, considering that the sanctimonious Massie has accused Trump of trying to protect billionaires from exposure as it relates to the Epstein files, don't you think it's time to look into Massie's background? Because I don't think the people in the 4th District of Kentucky really know who Massie is. After all, his district voted for Trump by approximately 65%, yet Massie delights in opposing the president. So with that, what I want to know is, first, did your cousin really accuse you of being a homewrecker on Facebook? What did he mean by that? Now, I was aghast at the news of your wife's death and saddened by it, but given this reported post by your cousin, of which I have seen a copy, is there any truth to it? Remember, Mr. Massie, you shouldn't throw stones in glass houses. Now, here's another question. Since you are so keen on using the U.S. debt to justify all your no votes on most legislation, is it true that you ran through something on the order of $1 million on your house, ran out of money and couldn't finish it, and lived in it without an occupancy permit? The reason for this question is, if you are such a poor money manager, how dare you lecture the nation on spending and the debt issues? The next question is, what are the circumstances surrounding your so-called patents that you promoted as you having so much gravitas and smarts that entitled you to be a representative? Was this something more of a group effort achieved in a laboratory with others involved? Or are you just taking undue credit for it all? Are you, like so many other politicians, exaggerating your credentials? Frankly, Mr. Massie, given your conduct and how you don't cooperate with your other Republican colleagues, I think you're a fraud. Well, I have many more questions for Representative Massie, who seemed to be making himself a national Republican nuisance, snuggling up to the radical left, all for his personal gain. But for now, let's get some answers to these questions. Let's find out who Mr. Massie is, because I don't think his constituency really knows who he is. He's, as I have said, he's a pretend Republican. Oh, here's a little postscript for you. I think I referred to the FCC as the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission. I meant to say Federal Communications Commission. That is who pull the licenses of, or who would pull the licenses of the leftist media. Sorry for that, but just checking to see if some of you nerds out there were paying attention when I flipped and said FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission, when it should have been the Federal Communications Commission. Well, that's all for today. Spread the word, spread the truth, do your part, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.